one of the ways that you can see Democrats for who they really are, especially the more they talk about social justice and racial justice, there seems to be a correlation with the moment that they have an opportunity, let's say, to separate themselves from those who are low income, to make sure that there's no low income housing on their block or in their neighborhood, because, property values and schools and stuff. The hypocrisy is laid bare for all to see. An example of this recently is Nantucket, which is one of the sister island of Martha's Vineyard. There is a huge movement there. It's an almost entirely Democrat enclave now of some of the richest people in the world and some of the most expensive real estate in the world. They don't want any affordable housing at all on the island, even though there are, workers, servers at restaurants, gas station attendants, people that need affordable housing. Steph Curry is one of the richest athletes on the planet. I didn't even realize he was the fifth highest paid athlete in the world last year. And the story today, Clay, is that Steph Curry and his wife are asking the Bay Area government. They're right next to Palo Alto, which, again, some of the most expensive real estate in the world. They're in Atherton, California. They're trying to stop low-income housing from going up in their neighborhood. And I can't imagine, Clay, because doesn't social justice mean that you should want to welcome the low-income residents who are doing the hard jobs and trying to elevate themselves on the socioeconomic ladder? Shouldn't a social justice advocate with hundreds of millions of dollars to spare, like Steph Curry, want to have low-income individuals in his neighborhood so that he can spend time with them and they can all work together to elevate the community?
Yeah, there's some details in here that I think are great, Buck. First of all, they live in Atherton, Atherton, California, which is ranked as the most expensive zip code in the United States a year ago, according to Forbes. Land is worth about $8 million per acre, according to a councilman in Atherton. And what's going on here is they have opted to upzone a 1.5 acre lot, with the property owner planning to develop 16 three-story townhomes. And the idea of the townhomes, obviously, is to be more affordable in the most expensive residence in the zip code in the entire country. And Steph Curry and his wife wrote a letter to the town voicing concerns. I'm reading from Outkick. We did a good job covering this. Mark Harris, one of our writers at Outkick, did. They sent it to me this morning. They said, "We hesitate to add to the not in our backyard, literally, rhetoric, but we wanted to send a note before today's meeting. Safety and privacy for us and our kids continues to be our top priority and one of the biggest reasons we chose Atherton." They said that if the project's to move forward, they don't want it in literally their backyard. So it is amazing how often this happens. $30 million house, reportedly, that Steph Curry owns in the most expensive town in America. And he and his wife have written a letter, not only voicing their displeasure maybe privately about this rezoning, they have written a letter to the board to try to prevent townhomes from being built in the vicinity of their home.
You know what I think has started to run its course as one of the go-to left-wing explanations for why all of a sudden the rules that they advocate for, what the Democrats want for the rest of us, don't apply? It's about my safety. We know that they abuse the notion of emotional safety to shut down speech, right? Democrats will say, your words make me feel unsafe. But now, for example, remember the mayor of New Orleans just a few months back, LaToya Cantrell. She was flying first class as the mayor all over the place. And people started to say, really, you need to have the city paying for you to fly first class all the time? And she didn't even say, look, it's a perk of the job, or she said, it's for my safety, because she claimed for a black woman to fly with her profile, it's inherently a personal safety issue. And by the way, as if flying first class makes you safer than flying in coach. It makes your knees and maybe your back a little safer from the extra comfort, but I don't think it is it's not like they've got armed guards in first class on the plane and the back of the plane.
In fact,
is a free-for-all.
everyone walks past you in first class. If you're really concerned about your safety, you should want to sit in the very back row of the airplane because people can't get to you as easily, right?
If you want to be incognito, fly in, seat 37J right next to the toilets. Nobody will have any idea who's back there.
Also, the mayor of New Orleans. We have the biggest radio show in the country. What percentage of our audience would know the mayor of New Orleans if she were right now listening to this show sitting next to anybody in this entire audience? Not even 1%.
Not even.
I bet the majority of New Orleans residents, even in the city of which she is the mayor, would not recognize her in the city of New Orleans. So the idea that she is in danger, this is always kind of ludicrous. I mean, look, it's crazy.
We can even take it to Steph Curry again for a second here.
Yeah.
Because Steph Curry is, as we said, the 5th highest paid athlete in the world. I mean, this guy is, Clay, what's he probably making? 20, 30 mil a year at least? 40 mil?
I bet well over. Because the NBA salaries now, he's probably making $35 million minimum in salary, and I bet he's making another 25 or 30 in endorsement income. So 50, 60 million easy.
This is a guy who, for his family, can afford round-the-clock, year-round security without it even. It's a rounding error. It could care.
He wouldn't even
matter.
notice the cost.
He could hire the best security service he could possibly imagine. The best security system installed for his home, owns multiple homes, but we're even by assessing that component of it's about our safety and the safety of my family. I'm sorry, people who could only afford $250,000 for, a 1-bedroom in the townhouse that might be built, are they dangerous, Steph? I just want to know, are these the dangerous people or are they the undesirables in your super fancy neighborhood? This is where the libs always get exposed, Clay. It happens in New York with real estate, with schools. It's always, what do you mean you don't want to rezone all of other people's suburbs so that there's multifamily housing and projects going up and whatever? Oh, you don't want to do that? Wait, but who does want to do that?
And Buck, this is for anybody who's listening to us right now in the Bay Area at all. This is probably the single biggest issue in the Bay Area. And I know there's a lot. They don't enforce crime laws. They got all sorts of drug and homelessness issues. But I would argue, if you talk to people in the Bay Area, if you have a family and you work as a cop, if you work as a school teacher, if you work as a fireman, there are almost no affordable places to live in many of these communities. And this Atherton place, I'm sure, is trying to build these townhomes so that in theory they at least have some people who work in public services in their community who could afford to live there.
This is my older brother did a semester in business school out at Berkeley, so right there. And I remember talking to him, all these, my brother, we talk a lot, and this is going back now almost a decade, about his time there, and it has been a problem all along that has only gotten worse, exactly what you're discussing, which is, where do you live if you have, when you see the property taxes, the cost of these homes, and people who say, well, that's just the market, that is absolutely false. California makes it effectively impossible from a developer standpoint to build new homes, to, the way they do zoning, environmental impact, everything. They make it as difficult as possible. And really what you see is a class system in geography, whereby the rich libs who love Nancy Pelosi and Gavin Newsom live as close to the water, places like Atherton, by the way, on the bay, close to the water as possible, and their servant class, the people that, keep the plumbing going, pick the food, do all the service jobs that exist.
Landscaping, they're teaching of the kids. Literally everything.
They live in the interior of California, far away, because that's the only place where they can actually afford to live. So you have in California a system that looks more and more like what you had in some Latin American countries. I was going to say Venezuela, but they've actually just made everybody poor now because their socialism finally collapsed the whole system. But you have this separation of Brazil is a good example, extremely rich, and everyone else is poor and in the servant class. And, you see this once again. Clay, you mentioned how big a problem it is. There are people who work for Google, young people, who there have been whole articles written about this, choose to live in their van and shower and eat the food, etc., that they have at their job and live in a van in the parking lot because it is that expensive, even if you're making 150 grand a year.
And I think what you said is so important. He's arguing that his kids are not going to be safe because there's some poors who might live in the neighborhood. And by the way, poor is not really poor, right? Because even the poor people in Atherton are going to be upper middle class, right? It's not like they're going to build 16 townhomes that cost $80,000 each, right, for people to be able to buy. It's going to be people who have normal lifestyles and are working in these communities.
So Steph Curry is such a social justice advocate that he thinks that people who can only afford a $200,000 or $300,000 home are scary and might hurt him and his family. That is the implication of his position on this. But you see, it's such a stupid argument. We all know he actually just wants to be surrounded by rich people and his property values to stay high. That's actually what it is. He doesn't really hold those people in contempt. That's just the way the argument plays out because he doesn't want to admit that this is really just about I get to live in a rich neighborhood surrounded with rich people, right? That's really what's at the heart of this. And find me a rich liberal and you will find somebody who does not want, multifamily zoned right on their property line or near it or in their neighborhood or in their zip code, who does not want a lot of illegal immigrants to be all of a sudden showing up, living in their neighborhood, using their schools, using their across the board. This is their Achilles heel. This is the weakness that they all have.